Good morning.
Morning. Welcome to today's daily devotional. So you have figured out that we are your guests for today. And if you have been following the daily devotionals throughout the week, you will know that we have been looking at the life of Peter and the journey he went on with Jesus. And we're going to look at a really pivotal moment in Peter's life today, which is actually the moment he became Peter. So for those of you who perhaps aren't so familiar with this, Peter wasn't always known as Peter, but was actually born as Simon. And we're going to look at the moment today that he did become Peter. So we're going to start in our Bible at Matthew 16, verse 13, which is Peter's confession of Christ. So when Jesus came to the region, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say the Son of Man is?" And they replied, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets." "But what about you?" he asked. "Who do you say I am?" And I'm just going to stop there because we thought that was very personal. You know, this is a moment where Jesus is sharing that actually people are gossiping about him. They are calling him all sorts of different names, none of which are really accurate. And he's keen to know precisely who the disciples believe him to be, and perhaps just as importantly, who they are saying he is. So Simon, or Peter, actually answered this straight away and said, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And we thought that was actually quite brave of Peter to do that, because it's so easy to go along with the crowd and just agree with what everyone else is saying to fit in and for an easy life. But Peter actually didn't do that, and he bravely stepped out and said something different.
Yeah, he obviously searched his heart, and because Jesus made that very personal, it wasn't a question about him. It was, who am I? So he obviously searched his heart, and then God revealed to him who Jesus was.
Right. And Jesus goes on to discuss that further. So he says to Simon, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by man, but by my Father in heaven. And I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it." So really in response to that, Jesus did go ahead and reveal the name Peter and give that to Simon. And so we decided to look into the name a little bit, because we thought, of all the names available, why would you choose the name Peter? So we found out that it's likely to come from the Greek Petros, which roughly translates as stone or pebble. And again, we thought, well, why this name for Simon? Does this match his personality? And this looks like probably not. In some respects, some people say that Simon was perhaps quite rash, perhaps wore his heart on his sleeve, perhaps was quite spontaneous or erratic, which doesn't really tie in with the image of a sturdy, consistent rock as such. So we really wanted to look into this in terms of personal identity, and at that time a lot of people would find an identity for themselves because they would identify with their occupation, what they did, and also with their father. And actually, for a certain degree, that's still true today. When we introduce ourselves to new people, we often say what our name is and actually what we do, rather than perhaps more personal information about who we are. So we found this really interesting, and we know that traditionally Simon was a fisherman. That was what his father did and his family did. And we know through the other verses in the Bible that Jesus actually said to Simon that he would make him a fisher of men instead. So perhaps this change in name really helped Peter to look at himself in a different light and really identify with himself in a different way. We could see that God was really trying to call something out of Peter here, and build his church, as Jesus says in this verse. So we really thought perhaps the change in name was what sparked Peter to look into this more. Sometimes we have, certain abilities that we don't always see in ourselves confidently, and perhaps that maybe the people around us don't see, but God sees it. God knows what's in there, and Jesus was really calling it out of Peter at this moment. And as we said, perhaps this change in name was really enabling Peter to step up to the mark, to follow God in the way that he needed to do so. So we're looking at some other verses about this and about the meaning of rock, and we came across Peter, chapter 2, verse 4.
Yeah, so in Peter chapter 2, verse 4, it says, "As you come to him, the living stone, rejected by humans but chosen by God, and precious to him, you also, like living stones, are built into a spiritual house, to be a holy priesthood, offering spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ."
Yes, and we just thought that was really interesting, because obviously as Christians we all want to devote our lives to Jesus and build upon this work, and perhaps Peter was really the first stone of many, and we all really have a part to play in this. If we are being compared, as Peter says, that we are all living stones, we all perhaps knit together and help to form the foundation of the church that Jesus was really trying to build.
Yeah, so this is a question we all have to answer as well. Is Jesus saying to you, "Who do you say I am?" In Timothy, Timothy 6, verse 11, it says, "Pursue righteousness, godliness, faith, love, endurance, and gentleness. Fight the good fight of faith. Take hold of eternal life to which you were called when you made your good confession in the presence of many witnesses." So that's quite similar to Peter, really. He made his confession to God of who he was in front of witnesses, so in front of the other disciples.
Yeah, which again, is a brave thing to do. Perhaps one-to-one Jesus to Peter may have been easier, but Peter wasn't afraid to step forward and say what he really believed in his heart, irrespective of what everyone else was saying or doing at that time.
Yeah, with this being a question we all have to answer, it's a question you can answer now, but eventually everyone will have to answer it. In Revelation 20:11, it says, "The dead will be judged according to what they've done, and it will be recorded in the books. The sea will give up the dead that are in it, and death and Hades will give up the dead that are in them, and each person will be judged according to what they've done." So that's a question. We're all going to have to stand in front of Jesus at some point, and whether we realise it later or we realise it now, that's something we're going to have to deal with.
Absolutely, and think about in full. And actually what really ties all these verses together is the sense of action. In the first verse that we read, where Peter became Peter, Jesus said to the disciples, "Who do you say I am?" He didn't say, "Who do you think I am?" or "Who do you reckon I am?" He wanted to know what they were doing and what they were saying. And this follows suit throughout all the other verses that we've read today in Timothy about pursuing righteousness and godliness, and looking at what you have done in Revelation. And we really wanted to encourage you to start thinking about that and your relationship with God, and think about what you are saying and what you are doing, and really encourage you to bear that in mind in your prayers this week. Perhaps
spend some time just speaking to God, telling Jesus, who He is.
Really declaring it to God, who He is to you, what He means to you, and what He's done in your life.
Yeah, And if you don't know God yet, or you just searching, not too sure, like to find out a little bit more, we'd encourage you to find out a bit more by...
Yeah, get in touch with us. We're available on Facebook. We've got the Sheffield Christian Life Centre website. Do send us a message, and I'm sure someone would be very happy to get back in touch with you and discuss this further.
So have a great week, everyone, and we'll hopefully see you all soon.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.